Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to start with a question. What if I told you I had all the answers to national security? Well, first of all, I probably wouldn't be here. I'd probably be very rich, relaxing on an island somewhere. But I am here, which means, unfortunately, I don't, but I can get us close, and that is with space technology. Space is no longer just the final frontier. Space is now part of the front line in times of conflict. Think about it. Our militaries rely on space-derived data, connectivity, and insights to synchronize troops, to navigate battlefields, to detect threats early and in time. Our governments rely on space for secure communications, to monitor global activities, and to keep civilians safe in times of disasters. And even commercial markets, from finance and banking to air traffic control, rely on space to function. So space is no longer just up there, as we've heard today. Space is down here, it's on Earth, and it's in everything. I'm Trisha Saxena. I'm a senior associate on the investment team at the NATO Innovation Fund, and I'm here to tell you today why space is so critical to maintaining the alliance's technological edge in times of conflict and crisis. So NATO, as we all know, an alliance of many countries around the globe, has identified space as an operational domain. This is alongside land, sea, air, and cyber. Why is that? Well, it's because the threats and the vulnerabilities are real. GPS can be jammed, satellites can be jammed, assets in space can even be attacked or shot down. As we've seen in recent years, adversarial nations have the ability to do this, they've demonstrated it, and we're now aware of their capabilities. So space is no longer just peaceful by default, as much as we would like to think. It's strategic terrain. Even the European Space Agency has pivoted, as we heard earlier from Luca. It's not just about funding research and science. ESA now collaborates directly with EU defense frameworks to protect all of this critical infrastructure Europe has in space. And new initiatives for communications and navigation systems really highlight how space has a part to play in resilience in times of crisis, whether that be a cyber attack or a military conflict. What's also important is space is becoming increasingly congested, contested, and competitive. By some estimates, there are now almost 10,000 satellites in space, and new mega constellations are being launched in the thousands. And not all of these are necessarily benign. What might look like a communications satellite could also have surveillance capabilities. Space is inherently dual use. But I don't want to alarm you. I'm not here to cause panic. I'm here to encourage you all to think strategically. Space can be a source of risk, but it's also very much a source of resilience. And in NATO's own words, ensuring peaceful operation in space is critical to ensuring the alliance's deterrence and defense posture. So what next? What can we do about it? I'm going to take some examples from our own portfolio. And I'll start off by introducing the NATO Innovation Fund itself, or the NIF. The NIF is a €1 billion fund that was launched 2 years ago, backed by 24 European LP nations. So our funding comes from these individual countries, including Latvia, and I'm very happy to be here today because of that. And we have a mandate to invest in deep tech, breakthrough scientific innovation, where it applies in dual-use markets such as defense, security, and resilience. So we look at sectors such as space, of course, but also quantum, biotech, materials, AI, energy, all of these technologies that we absolutely need to have access to over the next decades to ensure a resilient Europe. We work very closely with our LPs, which can be ministries of defense, or government representatives. We also work closely with aerospace and defense primes, defense organizations, to make sure we're investing in the most strategically relevant technologies to NATO and to allied countries. But we are also an independent, standalone venture capital fund, much like any other VC fund you might meet here today, which means we can make our investment decisions independently. And that's important because we are inherently a dual-use fund. That means we're looking for very large commercial markets and defense and security markets because we're financially driven and we want to make a return for our LPs and we want to continue to support deep tech innovation in Europe. So I've mentioned some of these topics that we look at. And the key overarching themes for us are very much defense, security, and resilience. So what this means is dual use for us doesn't just mean a technology that can be deployed on the battlefield or by a military. It's things like energy resilience, communication security, these fundamental topics that Europe needs to make sure it has access to in times of conflict. And space, as you'll see in the middle, cuts across all three themes. We absolutely need to ensure we have secure access to space in the future. So how have we done this? Well, so far, in the 2 years that we've been around, we've invested in at least 5 space or space-adjacent companies, and we're very excited to make more investments in the future. We've covered everything from launch to Earth observation to in-space manufacturing of semiconductors and materials, as well as more space-adjacent topics such as secure quantum communications and the manufacturing of lightweight and novel materials for the aerospace supply chain. So I'm going to talk through each of these in turn to bring to life why these topics are so important to us as a fund. Starting with launch. Without launch, space doesn't really exist. It is the key bottleneck to accessing space today, and governments and commercial companies around the world rely on just a handful of commercial companies such as SpaceX, Rocket Lab, and that's simply not okay. We need to make sure we have secure and reliable and sovereign access to space in Europe. And that's why we've invested in ISAR Aerospace, a German advanced manufacturing and rocket company that actually had its first demo launch just a few weeks ago. And we're very excited to see where they go next. Now, Earth observation, this is intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, all rolled into one, and it comes in many different flavors. You have SAR, synthetic aperture radar. This allows you to see structures at night and in the dark. You have infrared. This allows you to pick up thermal and heat signatures of buildings and power plants to understand what's going on inside. And for example, you have hyperspectral, which allows you to pick up chemical signatures and identify camouflaged objects or chemical spills. So we've invested in a Belgian company, Sense, that develops very, very high-resolution optical and hyperspectral payloads for satellites, and they already are deployed across multiple government and commercial customers. And finally, SpaceForge, one of my favorite portfolio companies, manufacturing high-quality, defect-free semiconductors in space. Now, you might think, what's the point of going to space? Well, we have semiconductor supply chains on Earth. Well, actually, if you look at it, semiconductors are used in everything from cars to mobile phones to computers. We must have at least 500 semiconductors in this room right now, and it's one of the biggest choke points in global supply chains. We need to make sure we have access to high-quality semiconductors, and by putting them in space, you actually put them away from harm's way. It's much harder. I know I talked about anti-satellite weapons, but it's still much harder to shoot down a semiconductor manufacturing lab if it's in space versus if it's on the ground. And by creating much more efficient and high-performance semiconductors, they can improve the supply chain we have here on Earth in commercial and in defense markets. So I hope what I've highlighted here today is that space can mean many different things. And space is not just it's not just a policy, it's not just something to talk about in a hyperbolic sense. Space really is infrastructure, and space is strategy. It's defense, security, and resilience. So I started off by asking whether I have all the answers to national security. I don't. But I think if you look up, you might find some of them are circling high above us, silently in orbit, waiting for us to put them into practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.